I saw Hardcore Henry and I had a blast. So, Hardcore Henry is a first-person action film. In this film, a man named Henry wakes up. We see it all through his eyes as he's being reconstructed, and yeah, some sort of crazy accident happened, and so now he's getting robot parts. And he's being worked on by his wife, but he really has no more memories. Well, suddenly this crazy corporation comes in, attacks, kidnaps his wife, and wants to build an army of super advanced robots, or cyborgs, basically. And it's up to Henry, with the help of another guy, to stop this evil corporation and rescue his wife. Now look, this is definitely not for everyone. Hardcore Henry is a non-stop, very violent, very brutal action film. It's rated R for a reason. If you're not into that super violence and crazy, over-the-top stuff, then yeah, this is not going to be a movie for you. Also, if you easily get motion sickness, and you can't really stand found footage films if they get too shaky, or other action films if they get too shaky, this might be a little too much for you as well. Mainly, the main hurdle of the film is the perspective. Now, it is first person. It does have a bit of a found footage feel, so sometimes it does get a little shaky and violent. Ultimately, if the perspective gives you sick or gives you a headache, you're ultimately going to hate this film. That makes sense. So it definitely makes sense why this movie is really close to split down the middle. But even if you are easily motion sickness to other films like this, it's not necessarily going to give you motion sickness. Motion sickness is a really weird thing. Because my father went to this movie with me. I was with my father and my cousin. And I remember him not liking a lot of found footage films because it gets too shaky. Ultimately, the main reason he hated the first Cloverfield movie, it was too shaky and he got a bit sick. And so I was worried for my dad with this film, but he did not have any motion sickness whatsoever during this movie, which is odd because I find this a little shakier than Cloverfield. Motion sickness affects people in different ways. Sometimes it affects people while other times it doesn't. And maybe it's because you sort of expect it. When you see these punches getting thrown, you expect the camera to move in a certain way. And so it kind of feels natural how the camera moves and shakes about. You kind of expect it once you see what's going on in the film. Another reason why some people might not like it is it lacks story, supposedly. Well, here's the thing. It's an action movie. It's a simple action movie with a simple premise. It's not striving to have a huge, big story. It's striving to have something fun, chaotic, and really intense. And the story that was there was ultimately good. It had just enough little twists and turns that made the movie really interesting. As far as acting goes, the standout is easily Jimmy, or played by Sharlto Copley. I'm sure I pronounced that wrong. You know the guy from District 9 and Elysium and plenty of other movies. He was easily the standout role in this movie. He had a lot of range, and the whole story about him and the twist about him was really great. He's the standout, and he's probably one of the things that has more character development than the rest of the characters. He was fun, he was a blast, he was amazing. I feel everyone else was good, but I feel that the main villain was a little over the top and a little too cartoony at times. Now, as far as our main character, as far as Henry goes, maybe he is a bit of an empty slate. And I can see why some people are saying, hey, there's not enough character with him. He's not a main character we can really get involved with, really care about. But honestly, I see exactly where the movie was going for with Henry. He's meant to be the kind of main character in some first-person shooter games where we put ourselves into the role. Henry's meant to kind of be us. Now, is there things in this movie where it does show Henry's humanity? Yes, little things. If you're looking carefully and you're watching, he does show a lot of humanity throughout the film, with little moments where he tries to help innocent bystanders. There is definitely humanity in him, you just have to watch and pay attention. Now, when many people claim this movie to be a first-person shooter type movie, and that it's more like a video game turned into a movie, I didn't really see it that way as I was watching the movie. I just saw it as a normal action movie done in the first person perspective. It wasn't until after I watched the film, after I started thinking about it, that I realized, yeah, there actually is a lot of video game tropes within this movie. There's the silent protagonist. There's the memory loss. The first-person shooter action scenes. Now, without spoiling anything, there is a scene, a whole level, where Henry has to protect, it's a protection mission. There's sort of classic scenario where the person you're trying to help or save is going down in an elevator, and you have to keep on a level just below the elevator and take out all the enemies before they can take out the person in the elevator. I've seen that done in quite a few video games. I just can't think of any off the top of my head. So yeah, there's definitely little things, little tropes, but it wasn't until after the movie was done and I was thinking about it that I really realized the tropes. And that's because the tropes in this movie conformed so well with the actual story itself that it didn't feel like it was trying to be cliches and tropes of video games or trying to be video game adaptations into a movie. It felt natural to the story and I didn't really see those tropes. And so it kind of does work on both levels of being just an action movie in the first person perspective, as well as being a nod to first person shooters. The movie is action packed, it's very violent. All the action really does build up as the movie progresses. For me, it never felt like there's one scene that felt like, okay, this is where everything was great and now it's starting to go downhill. It always felt like a real good progression of the action. And while it is a few times where he has to go from point A to point B, and it does get repetitive in that nature, the action itself doesn't get repetitive because it's very different each time. The first couple are more like sneaking missions. Then it's a car chase. Then it's a protection mission. There's also a sniper mission. There's a foot chase. And I'm not going in order anymore because there are some things I'm remembering earlier on. And then there's an all-out brawl hand-to-hand combat. Ultimately, the action does become different enough where it's not repetitive. At least I didn't feel that way. And I have to say, with the twists and turns towards the end of the movie, I did actually feel like my mind was blown. I kind of saw it coming, but at the same time I was like, whoa, that was freaking amazing. In all honesty, the only real main issues I have with the film is the fact that some of the CGI does look a little cartoony. Now I know a lot of this does look like practical effects, but sometimes the fire itself looks a little cartoony, and I can't tell if it's actually real fire or CGI fire, but there's something off about some of the fire and some of the car crashes. And there's one little moment, one small part of a scene that looked cartoony as hell and really took me out of the film. It's a very quick sequence, and this might be nitpicky, but it really took me out when it's this grenade launcher scene. If you've seen the movie or you haven't seen it, without spoiling anything, when he gets this grenade launcher, there's a moment where he's shooting some bad guys and it looks cartoony as hell because of course it can't be close to any realism. I mean, you can't really shoot people with a grenade launcher, that would be unsafe. But there's something about it that just looks really cartoony and almost reminded me of how kind of cartoony the Doom sequence looked. You know, the movie Doom, when they actually do the first person mode and you see the gun and the hand, and the gun in the hand kind of look like CGI gun in hand. That's kind of what it looked like in this small sequence, and I didn't really like it that much. But yeah, that's the only real gripes I have with the movie, is some of the CGI looks a little bad from time to time. Other than that, I really had a fun time with this movie. I was laughing a lot, I was admiring the gruesome, crazy, brutal stuff that happened in this movie. I did ultimately like the story, and I really liked Jimmy. Jimmy was my favorite part of the movie. So I'm going to give Hardcore Henry 4.5 stars. I really enjoyed it, and like I said, it's going to be one of those films that you either love or hate, and most of it depends on the fact that it's a first-person perspective. That's what's going to get people hating this film more than anything else, if they get sick watching it. But if you don't get motion sickness and you can handle that sort of perspective, then, and you like non-stop action movies, then you might have a blast watching this movie. So, has anyone seen Hardcore Henry? What did you think about it? Go ahead and comment below. If not, what is your favorite non-stop action movie? And if you like this video and you want to see more, please subscribe and check out my movie reviews of 2016 and 2015. As always, this is Bruce Gifford, and this was just my opinion.